Guys, so this is a very uncomfortable situation when I'm here next guard. Meaning, if he is able to extend...
I was doing karate until I was 13, and I remember all my neighborhood was very excited because we're gonna watch live on TV the first ever Vale Tudo tournament in the United States called the UFC. Went to my house and I watched live, and then I saw how the Jiu-Jitsu is effective. And then that said, wow, this is the real deal, no more karate for me. So the next day, I went for a Jiu-Jitsu class and I never stopped. Even though my parents was watching, because they don't like too much of the MMA, they were also against me competing on the UFC. Because growing up in Copacabana, it's very common to do street fights, you know, and you want to be always the one that wins the street fights. So I looked for the most effective martial arts. And then when I saw that with my own eyes, a skinny guy like Royce beating huge muscle opponents, so there's nothing in the world that can beat Jiu-Jitsu.
Week 5, Class A, high kick, triangle.
Work hard, learn your lessons, and then you get to the top. And it's not surprisingly that he's still at the top of his division up to now, all these years later, because he's so resilient.
I think, yes, definitely purple belt was the turning point for me. When I started, just lose, man. I couldn't win nobody. And the Gracie Barra creed nowadays is no quitting attitude. And when the kids say that, you know, I remember myself, no quitting attitude.
Over, you're gonna put him guard again. You should have been keeping him here under, right? Now you're gonna
He's able to reinvent himself, keep learning, keep getting better over the years. So he's quite a remarkable story in Jiu-Jitsu and in Gracie Barra that a lot of people should pay attention to, because it's one thing for you to win a couple of world titles. It's a whole nother thing for you to win many world titles and stay active and stay competitive for decades. I don't know of any other person that I know closely that has that type of story. And if people pay attention to him, and hopefully through these conversations that we're having with him, we'll be able to better understand his mindset so we can all learn from him, not just from his Jiu-Jitsu that is amazing, but also about how he thinks, about his training, how he carries himself. Huge inspiration for everybody at Gracie Barra Jiu-Jitsu, that's for sure.
He's a ultra heavy. He won the worlds as a brown belt, and then he stopped competing as a black. But back on that time, he was super good training partner for me. Once you join Jiu-Jitsu back in the 90s, it was very common to have the taparia. Today you call the combat Jiu-Jitsu. So you do the regular training. After training, you have the taparia, and then it's like every day, every class we have that. So it was super common. So we already built on a different level of toughness. So it was normal for us to do the transition, not say transition, but together, Jiu-Jitsu and MMA.
And then you add to that Professor Café's personality, few words, straight to the point, that made him a very unique fighter, that for many of us that were competing, they were part of the same generation, we admired a lot, and we all looked up to him as a good reference that made our entire generation of fighters better.
Have kind of game A only, and your game does not work, you lose the match. And then when you turn purple belt, you become more a complete fighter. So you have more options on your game. You can go bottom, top, it doesn't matter at all. And that makes you more reliable to win tournaments. I remember myself, I used to train at the Gracie Barra Matriz in Rio de Janeiro. So, and they have a big stairs to get to the last third floor where it was the training. And every day that I walk that stairs, I already start sweating. Not because of the exercise, but for what they expect me on the top, like 20 black belts in a row, all the toughest training that you can imagine. So it was amazing.
Well, Café is one of the biggest ambassadors of Gracie Barra. So it's not surprisingly that he represents so well all of our three core values: brotherhood, integrity, development. So if you start with our first core value, brotherhood, in spite of being one of the greatest names of the sport, he has always put the team in front of himself. In many instances, I saw him proudly representing Gracie Barra as a competitor, as an instructor, as a school owner, and always being a person that chooses to be on the right side of the difficult situations that we have to go through as a team. Obviously, Gracie Barra has now 40 years. Professor Café has been fighting for Gracie Barra at least for the last 20 years. So you would expect somebody who's been involved with the organization for that long, through playing so many different roles, that he's been through many different cycles within the team. And what I've always observed and I've always heard from people close to him is that he was always choosing to be on the right side. And it's typically on the side of what's best for the team, he will support. But it's even more unique because when the person is very successful, either because they have an amazing school or they are an outstanding instructor or an amazing athlete, the path for them to follow alone is much more clear. And he definitely had a path to build his own thing, build his own brand, but he chose to stay with Gracie Barra, stay with his team, and help his team become the amazing organization that we are now. So that's where brotherhood stands out. And then obviously development, it just keeps getting better.
The belt has its own values. The belt represents your development. So when you get a new belt, you have to always change your mentality, whatever it is, always getting better. So when I got the purple belt, my mentality changed. When I got the brown belt, even better. And when I got the black belt, I couldn't even sleep. I remember the day I won the awards brown belt, and on the podium the black belt. So I went to sleep that day on the bed, the medal and the belt by my side. I hugged them.